Talk about focus and why focusing on one specific thing will make you a millionaire. Now, for the majority of my life, the reason why I became and succeeded in becoming a professional footballer, although succeeding is perhaps an overstatement, was because I focused on one specific thing throughout my entire life. So even though I went through education or I went through the entire different lifestyles and partying, I was locked in. In other words, I had tunnel vision. Right? And so basically how it works is, I want you to imagine that this is your goal, right? You want to become a millionaire, and in order for you to essentially reach this goal, you're going on a specific road, right? Let's talk about this analogy for a second. And so on a specific road, you are driving a car, right? The driver is essentially you, and the vehicle is perhaps the business you do, perhaps the job, the specific, occupation you do. So the vehicle is basically the blueprint, right, which could be a job, a business, or whatever not. And the driver is basically you. And the driver is, let me just put it you, right? And so I want you guys to understand that the majority of people out there, when they, everybody has this goal to be a millionaire. Like, honestly, who doesn't, right? But the issue is that the majority of people actually focus on the blueprint, on the specific business, the specific vehicle, the specific, instructions of how to get there. But the issue is, and I kind of got this from Andrew Tate as well, is Andrew Tate said that even if he, shows you the exact step-to-step instructions on how to get there, most likely you won't. And the reason is because if you think about it logically, the car is never as good as the driver. And so in other words, 90% of the time, or the reason of you actually reaching your destination, is the driver. And only 10%, right, accounts for the vehicle, right? And so as I mentioned earlier, the issue is that a lot of people focus on the 10%, right? They focus on the vehicle, and I can guarantee one thing for sure, and that's the point I was trying to make earlier, was even though you get a step-to-step instructions on how to get there, most likely you won't, and it's essentially because the driver is not ready. It's like having a poor driver, or like imagine a person absolutely horrendous in driving. I'm sure you guys know, friends or somebody who's perhaps terrible. Imagine him driving a sports car. And so no matter how good the car is, he most likely won't reach the destination. I mean, he could reach the destination, but it's going to take a goddamn long amount of time. And that's not what you want, right? The point is you want to become a millionaire as fast and as soon as possible, right? And so let's make a few things clear, right? So let's talk about the road, right? Because the road is perhaps the benchmark or the measure of, you seeing your progress on how far you are actually getting to reaching your specific goal, right? And so even though for this specific example, we see that the road is a straight line, in the majority of cases, it's actually a bumpy road. Look, perhaps something like this. I don't know, right? And then so basically you're driving, all these ups and downs, and then all these, basically metaphorically the extremes in life, all these extreme turns and whatsoever not, and then the road is suddenly very steep, or there's congestion, and that further proves the point that a driver has to be skilled, right? Because a driver who's not skilled will have a lot of trouble navigating through these extreme, hurdles, right? Let's put it that way. And so my point, what I was trying to make earlier, right, was the following with focus and tunnel vision, right? And so I want you guys to understand that focus is, for example, you would like to reach this destination, but focus will basically help you be on this specific track, right? And so in the other way, if you're not focused, basically every time there's some steep or hard turn, you take a break, you chill, you decide to change strategy. maybe you even decide to take a different route. And so if you're not focused, you are essentially stuck in the extreme phases, right? The ups and downs, the times when the roads are bumpy, right, essentially. And so the point is that with tunnel vision, you're supposed to, at least to some extent, understand that in order for you to get to the specific destination, you need to pull through and follow through with your plan. You can't just stick around for a few years and be like, hang on, now it's not going to work, and now I'm going to do, you know, something completely else. In other words, you know, go a different route or find a different vehicle, essentially, or who knows, maybe you want to, I don't know, change some stuff about you or have a different driver to walk the route that you want to, right? And so the point is, or the second point is, that the reason why tunnel vision and focus is so important is because the way the universe works is, in order for you to reach that specific destination, you need something called energy, right? And so essentially energy, in my personal opinion, is the currency of the universe, right? Currency, I'm not sure if you can see this because my camera is pointed a bit up. Currency of the universe. And so energy, again, through my personal understanding, is made of two stuff. One is time, and one is money, right? And so for a lot of people who work corporate, you probably understand this type of exchange, this type of transaction, because when you are, you know, like a fresh grad and you first start an entry job, one thing that you trade a lot for your energy is actually time. And hence why, you know, when you go to an entry job, your salary is perhaps not so high. But eventually, you know, when you transition into a more, I don't know, management role or leadership role, then you trade in more money instead of time. And so essentially how it looks like a specific equilibrium, right? And so your objective is to basically find a balance of time and money, right? Let's just put balance here. And so depending on how you want it, either you trade in more time or yourself, or you trade in more money, right? And so money in exchange of time. And I'll give you a very specific example. Like if you're running a business and you have staff, you essentially pay your staff salary because you're exchanging their time for you essentially wanting them to complete the job, right? So basically you're trading money for time, right? And so coming back to the previous point, both two principles, time and money, they make up something called energy. And so energy is basically the fundamental currency of the universe. And so I want you guys to understand that the universe is something like an absolute giving place. The universe can basically, imagine like Santa Claus, it can grant any type of wish that you ever want to. And that's the crazy thing, and I literally mean by anything, unless, you know, you're super realistic, like you want to be Superman or a superhero, but you get the point. The point is that the universe will grant any type of wish that you basically ask it for, right? But the universe, in exchange, wants something back. And the thing what it asks for back is actually energy, right? And so if you want to go a little bit deeper, I'll perhaps make another specific video about it. But how that works is essentially vibrations. You probably heard vibrations through the string theory, right? Here we are at physics again, string theory. And so vibrations in more simpler terms are basically actions. And so when you do actions, right, you do specific vibrations, the universe listens, and if you give it enough of vibrations, enough of actions, eventually the universe will unfold that specific reality to you. I don't know what I'm trying to draw here. I'm trying to symbolize the universe. And so you might be asking, like, why does the universe grant like anything you want to? And it's essentially coming back to one specific theory, and I won't elaborate on this too deep, but you have probably heard about Einstein's E equals mc2, right? And so basically that's a simple derivation of time, right, or the third dimension. Because the third dimension, and that's basically what it differentiates it from the fourth dimension, is essentially time. Right? And so third dimension, we got time, E equals mc2, and obviously there are specific metrics of E equals mc2, like, you know, the mass or the energy or whatever not. And so the point is, in the third dimension, basically the reality that we live in, we all depend on a universal factor, and that is time, right? And for everyone it's the same, right? It's a constant linear value that, you know, by every second, by every minute, by every hour. For us, it all progresses the same way, right? And so in the fourth dimension, time is irrelevant, right? Einstein said it himself, but in the fourth dimension, time is irrelevant. Or it's basically a concept that we don't understand. It's personally a concept hard for me to explain as well. But imagine in the fourth dimension, time is irrelevant. And when time is irrelevant, the following happens. We basically have a infinite segmentation of the universe. So in other words, we have infinite probabilities of every possibility. So that means that every type of reality either has existed, is existing, or is existing in the future, right? And so basically, if we have multiple variations of reality, the question is, like, which reality is ours, right? Multiple variations of reality. The question is, which reality is the one that you're living in? And the answer is, it depends on you. Basically, it literally depends on you. Now, if you want to be a little bit religious, right? You know, where people talk about stuff being written or your faith being, you know, put for you. Essentially, it's the same thing. I don't want to dismantle the theory or the huge debate between religion and science here. But the point is that these multiple variations of reality exist, and the one that you would like to portray or live in is depending on which one you want to live, right? And coming back to that earlier point, it depends on a specific currency that you're exchanging with the universe, and that is energy, right? And again, energy comes from actions, comes from vibrations, and you can study that a little bit more by looking at the string theory. And all the physics freaks here are probably cheering on this point, but basically that is how the fundamentals of the universe works. And so coming to the idea of tunnel vision, I want you guys to understand that it is absolutely important to focus on one thing, because you are limited on energy, right? You don't have a lot of energy. I mean, obviously your time is limited. Who knows how long, you know, you live on this planet Earth. But the point is, and you can probably track this with joules or, you know, the amount of energy you spend in a day. The point is there is a limit on the energy you have, right? And so in other words, like, be very conservative, one, about your energy, and number two, figure out the right areas you want to apply your energy. Like, for example, if you spread out your energy into building a business or suddenly becoming an actor or starting a family or marrying, like, you see that the energy is divided already, right? And so for the universe, it's fine, because it could grant basically any reality that it wants for you, but you have to specify on one specific area. Because if you want to be, for example, a millionaire, that requires a lot of energy, right? Because if it requires little energy, everyone can become that, right? And so if you would like to become a millionaire, your energy has to be highly concentrated. And so in order for it to be highly concentrated, you need to be focused, right? So that you can be able to metaphorically pay the universe, right, with the right currency of energy, and that specific reality, what I mentioned earlier with the fourth dimension, will basically unfold to you. And so over time, right, on average, you know, in my personal opinion, it would take 7 years, because I've seen videos and people, you know, talk about the millionaire journey, but it will take at least 5 to 7 years, depending again on how much you're concentrated and how much energy you're able, you know, to give up and in return sacrifice on other stuff that you don't want to, like partying, etc., etc. And so if you have enough tunnel vision and focus, you'll be able to achieve this goal. But you have to first fundamentally understand the entire theory, and once you have basically digested that, then I'll see you in the next video.